So I will open the meeting of May 28th of the Wilmington Economic Development Committee. We have myself, Tom Card, Lil Maselli, Carol. How do I say your last name, Carol? Carol Boisvert?
No, we say boys first.
Okay, sorry. I was trying real hard to make it French.
You said it the right way.
Pat Giroux, Suzanne Sullivan, and Nancy Valley in attendance as of this moment, and expecting at least a couple more to be joining us. The first order of business would be to review and hopefully approve the minutes from February 26th, 2020, which I had sent out some weeks ago. Is there any discussion, any edits to be made, or just
excuse me, Mr.
motion
Chair.
to approve? Say again, please.
Mr. Chair, if we could just read the preamble for everyone, that would be
Forgive
great.
me, yeah, John. Sorry, I'm an old dog, and this is a new trick, so I apologize. I'm required to read this. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, members of the public who wish to watch and listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner. WCTV, Channel 9 and Comcast Xfinity, or Channel 37 Verizon Fios, and live stream at wctv.org. The meeting of the Wilmington Economic Development Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members or the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Members of the public who would like to listen to the meeting while in progress may also do so via telephone by dialing 1-646-558-8656 and entering the meeting ID 886-5718-2668, and then press the pound sign and press pound again at the next voice prompt. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during that portion of the meeting designated for public comments. By following the steps previously noted, then press *9 on their telephone keypad. This will notify the meeting host that the caller wishes to speak. All callers using this feature will be placed into a queue in the order that they entered the prompt. In the event that despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide for real-time access, we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as we are able. Thank you, John. I'm sorry I have passed that over. So again, we open the meeting and I'm asking for any edits to the minutes of February 26th or motion to approve.
So moved.
Accepted from Suzanne Sullivan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lil Maselli. All in favor?
Aye.
We should do this by voice. Should we do this by voice? I think that's what I've seen the others do. So I'll say yes to me. Carol?
Yes.
Lil?
Yes.
Pat, you're muted. I got a thumbs up from Pat. Maybe we can unmute Patrick. Nancy?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
And I see Greg just joined us. So Greg, are you in approval of the motion to approve the minutes? I got a yes from Greg. It will be, okay, you will mute yourself. Okay, so good, we passed that. The reason that you see Shelley Newhouse's face on this Zoom call is because she has another meeting that she needs to run off to this evening. And it was I felt, and Jeff suggested that we have her in because on the agenda, it seems like we were probably going to navigate into a discussion about what can be done in town by the town to help specifically restaurants, but other institutions get open and get up and running sooner and faster. And so I don't want to belabor the point. I suspect there'll be questions. But Shelley, I guess maybe the question has already been asked of you indirectly or from other folks around town. I know that from my perspective and the perspective, sort of the economic development in town, I know phase 2 is still yet a couple of weeks away if the trends stay the way they are with regards to the health in the state. But if we do get to, I think it was June 8th of phase 2 would begin by all rights, what recommendations would you make, or what revisions or accommodations from your perspective on the health department could you see us participating or pursuing to help those restaurants? I'm specifically saying restaurants, but maybe there's other organizations too. Get up and running as quickly and as profitable as soon.
I think helping them out with getting outdoor seating will be huge for them, because I think that the indoor seating still is not going to be allowed in phase 2. So any sort of outdoor seating that they can offer, I think will just be helpful for any of them to be able to start to bring people back towards the restaurant, not do takeout. You know, if it's a nice night and someone wants to just sit outside and they can be served. I think those are the things that will be allowed in phase 2.
So what, and forgive me, I don't know the process, and we don't have to, I don't feel like I need necessarily to hear what exists today in a non-pandemic world. I imagine there are a number of steps that an institution or an establishment would need to go through in order to be permitted to have outdoor or expanded outdoor seating. In the pandemic mode, where we're in very unique circumstances, are we being more flexible? Is that the intent here?
Yeah, I wouldn't I would say that the outdoor seating will be on a temporary basis until the pandemic is over, or has curbed a little bit to where they're allowed to be fully operational with their indoor seating. So, and you know, that could be the whole summer. So they could really benefit from having the outdoor seating over the whole course of the summer. Really, for a Board of Health, there's not much they need to do for me to get the outdoor seating. It's just like a little sketch, a plan, maybe asking me how many seats that they want to have, how many tables. I like them to be 6 feet apart. And really just showing me, it doesn't have to be anything architecturally drawn. They can sketch it out themselves, where they're going to have it, making sure that it doesn't obstruct any driving around, you know, at a building, or throughways or fire lanes, things like that.
And so
that we're not, you know, you see some of these restaurants that are taking like half their parking lots and turning them into, you know, full-blown tent and everything. But we don't have too many restaurants, I think, that could do something like that. So it's really a small, I think they're going to be small, operational, you know, a few picnic tables here and there.
So if I hear you correctly, it wouldn't necessarily require that they submit a formal proposal to the Zoning Board of Appeals or planning or anything like that. It would be something that you'd have if you could review their sketch and their plan and give them the authorization to do this potentially?
I would say yes, but I don't want to speak for Valerie. So, and I already spoke to Al, the building inspector, today, and because we're in the same office and we're on the same page. We would just work with each place individually and not, you know, because if they had to go to meetings like planning board or site plan or Board of Appeals or anything like that, the summer would be over and their opportunity to have some outdoor seats would be gone.
I think that was the concern.
I think it's as a temporary basis, you know, and very reminding them that this is just for during this pandemic. You know, if they wanted to pursue, you know, a more permanent outdoor seating type of situation, then they'd have to do go through the proper permitting.
I think that's reasonable, and I'm glad to hear that seems to be the position of the town. I want to just pause for a second. I'm sorry, Senator Bruce Tarr has joined us, and amid conversation, I want to thank you, Senator, for joining us this evening. We're very much looking forward to your contributions in a few minutes. We're just kind of navigating. Shelley has to leave us for another meeting, and I wanted to make sure we could capture her thoughts and her opinions on some of these matters before she had to head out. So again, thank you, Senator, for joining us, as well as I think Representative Robertson is listening in, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Valerie, do you mind chiming in on what Shelley was just talking about? Is that consistent with how you would view the process as well, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think going through any sort of process, she's right. It would take quite some time, and I don't think that's what we're aiming for as a temporary thing. I think we will want to kind of review closely what they're proposing exactly, so that they are keeping everyone safe, safe, and and, kind of containing the area. So I think, I think it's going to be case by case, and I think with the team that we have at Town Hall to review these things, I think we can make sure that they're realistic and safe and kind of not crazy with it.
Awesome. I'll shut up for a minute. I asked the questions that were right on the top of my mind, but I know we have a number of other members of the committee that I'm sure would have some thoughts or some questions. So I guess I'm just going to go across the top of my screen. I know we all have different looking screens. Carol, you're to my right. Do you have anything you'd like to contribute or ask here?
Well, I know I've been sending you a couple of things that I've been pulling out of the paper over the past few weeks. I guess my question is, we're going to focus mainly on restaurants? I would think that would be where we need to focus. As far as retail and other businesses like that, we really don't have any control on, say, a small, I can't even think of one, another small business in town that might be in queue. So I know we kind of need to talk about it on the agenda, coordinating with Nancy and what they might be doing and so forth. But I guess my thoughts were, and I'm probably jumping way ahead here, would be to kind of refocus us completely, our committee. Our committee's kind of, in my opinion, seems to kind of be backburnered, I guess, to a more urgent thing, which is saving our current businesses. That's the way I look at it. Kind of making sure they all have a good solid foothold when we do open up, and that they can, that they can continue to prosper and we don't lose businesses. We've already got vacancies. The last thing we want is some of our small businesses to close. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Carol. I agree. And yeah, hopefully this evening, as kind of the next phase or the next agenda item, I definitely want to talk about what our mission statement was. Thank you, Suzanne, for making that recommendation. It is queued up and ready to go on screen when we get to that moment. But I think we will have to pivot what this committee is and what we, I guess, do for the foreseeable future to accommodate that need. And God willing, in the future, not too far in the distant, we can get back to looking at, developing an economy rather than saving it.
Right.
Lil, you are next to me, or the next on the ranking here. Do you have any additional comments or questions?
My only thing, and I think Shelley answered it, or at least touched on it, was for those businesses currently that cannot have outdoor seating, because they're in a residential area, excuse me, will they also be able to do that?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
We'll probably be on a much smaller scale.
Yeah,
they can do it. Maybe they only have 1 or 2 picnic tables.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure. And my second question is, just in talking with a friend from New Hampshire, they've opened some restaurants already, and I know some of them have time limits. They have people coming in, they can be in there for 90 minutes. Is that, place by place, or is that something that the town would recommend, or it would just
I think that's going to be phase 2 or 3, probably 3, when they actually allow more indoor seating. Wilmington hasn't been regulating more stricter guidelines than what the governor is recommending. So we'll probably just fall in line with what the governor decides and what their task force decides on things like that.
Great.
I don't see us as the Board of Health making anything more stricter. We haven't been doing that. So it's been working well.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lil. Pat, you're next on my screen. So do you have anything to bring in here?
Sure. My only question is, has there been any restaurants that have expressed interest in outdoor seating yet that you're able to?
Well, I mean, through the grapevine, I heard like Heavenly Donuts wanted to see if they could put a picnic table outside on their grassy area. Other than that, I haven't heard from anyone yet.
Okay.
Because I'm sure, when the governor has their press conferences, as soon as he says, well, we can have outdoor seating, then my phone will be ringing off the hook.
Right. So does the town have any plans to reach out to restaurants and retailers to let them know that we have, some interest amongst residents to see some sort of outdoor seating, or do we have any type of action in place in that regard?
I don't, because I really haven't been like soliciting things like that. So, but I feel like if you guys want to do that or even the chamber could do it, that's fine.
Sure.
Pat, I kind of think that would fit into us. Maybe we can talk about it perhaps after, but I'm thinking that if Yeah, maybe we can construct some type of a message coming out of our committee to the establishments in town, just making mention.
Yeah, and I would really make sure that you say this isn't a permanent, you know, it's not something that can be permanent. I just don't want to see some of these places thinking that now they can have outdoor seating forever.
I think we would,
Mr.
we
Chair,
would draft a message and probably have you and maybe Jeff look it over before anything went out for official consumption. Did someone ask for?
Mr. Chair, just to
Yes.
jump in here for a second, I do believe that the town will be looking to put something together in the way of a statement that it will at least outline the parameters as Shelley described, and I think we need to be very clear, as Shelley indicated, this would be a temporary measure. It's not intended to be a challenging bureaucratic process, but outlining what Shelley had indicated, there would be some kind of a sketch required, and giving them the parameters as to how the process would work. And we can put something out to that effect so that people understand, restaurant owners understand what the opportunities are.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, we'll seek to maybe try to do that. You know, I guess I know phase 2 is still a couple weeks out, but preparations would potentially need to be being made, you know, imminently. So thank you for that. Nancy, you're next on my grid here.
Well, this is all great news because this is all what I've been hearing from the restaurants that are chamber members. You know, they are interested in outdoor seating. I know, Shelley, you mentioned Heavenly Donuts, but Tremezzo's, and I've talked to a couple of other people. They have, for instance, Tremezzo's does want to put, you know, tables under the awning. He wants to do, you know, things on the side. So this is all great news, and it would be great if something from the town could definitely come out. And that's what I was going to see if there was some type of form that they could, you know, with the questions that you're looking to have answered, or the parameters specifically laid out on that form. And my other question is about, you know, if you're saying picnic tables, does the town have picnic tables that are accessible from the DPW that they could have? Again, we're not talking a lot of restaurants and probably a lot of tables, but is that something that the town can provide, or is that going to be another cost that the business owners would have to incur? Is right there.
We don't have the number of tables. The ones that we have, you'll probably recall seeing them around town at Rotary Park and Shawshene Field, a few places like that, but we don't really have many, and I would not anticipate that we would be able to provide tables for restaurants.
Okay, so just, you know, again, if that was on the communication, that would be helpful. And then the other question that they had would be, again, for someone like a Tremezzo's or a Rocco's, is would they be able to get temporary liquor licenses?
That is a separate issue, as I understand it. I actually had the administrative assistant check on that the other day. There's some legislation that is in the works here, but currently they're not able to sell alcohol outside. So it would, in order for that to happen, this legislation would need to pass. So the Alcohol Beverage and Control Commission are the regulators there. And we're told that there's legislation, but it has not been formally authorized. I'm not sure if perhaps our state senator or representative could speak to that, but.
Thank you. Yeah, Senator Tarr, please chime in. This is a great time.
So thank you. And this has been an issue that's garnered a lot of attention on Beacon Hill. The issue is that in order to serve alcohol outside, you need to modify your liquor license. And that process initiates with the local licensing authority, but then goes to the ABCC. And the problem is the process to get it approved at the state level takes several months. And the concern has been that by the time it gets approved, we'll have lost the summer season. And so there's been a lot of discussion about whether this could be done by executive order or whether it needs to be done by legislation. And the consensus that's been arrived at is it does need to be done by legislation. Senator Feeney has a bill that he's filed. It has a lot of co-sponsorship. I'm a co-sponsor of it. I'm sure that Representative Robertson has shown some interest in this as well. And so, I won't speak for him, but I would guess that he would be supportive. And we are trying to expedite that bill. And it's important to note that the ABCC itself is not opposed to the passage of this bill. They understand the exigent circumstances here and the fact that we might need to shorten the process. So essentially, the bill would allow the local licensing authority to be able to do this with minimal intervention by the ABCC.
It certainly makes sense. And thank you, Senator Tarr, for your insight on that and for supporting that measure. Clearly, it supports the local business community. Timelines for that, Senator? Is that the wheels of government sometimes don't move as quickly as the wheels of business, you know?
I would say that we should have some clarity on this within 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I know that's longer than folks would like it to be, Mike, but I'm trying to be realistic as well.
And I appreciate that. I mean, we're still potentially 2 weeks away. Like I said at the onset of the meeting, we're still potentially 2 weeks away from phase 2 initiating. So hopefully it will gain the support of the majority of your colleagues, and the business owners can sort of plan for that. Nancy, I'm sorry, I didn't. Senator Tarr, do you have more to offer at this point? And
the only thing I would suggest on the issue of restaurants, there's been a lot of discussion about what the standard should be. And initially the idea was we were going to use a percentage of the license capacity of the restaurant. The discussion has moved now far closer to using a performance standard about minimum separation. Essentially what Shelley was talking about at the beginning of the call, and it's headed in that direction. And so rather than saying, 25% of your capacity, which is somewhat arbitrary because we don't know what the building looks like, we don't know what the floor plan looks like. The group that's been meeting on that, the subgroup to develop the guidance, is now far more focused on saying how far apart should tables be, how far apart should people be, rather than just saying there's an across the board standard of 25% of capacity. So I would expect that soon we're going to have some more illumination around that point, but there's a lot of discussion happening right now about what the guidance is going to look like for restaurants. The other thing that's been happening, and I'm not so sure that it is as relevant in Wilmington as it might be in other communities that have more congestion in their central business districts, but there have been some communities that have talked about maybe closing streets or changing street configurations on a temporary basis to allow more room to be able to have outdoor dining, outdoor seating. So that's a conversation that's been ongoing as well. I do think that there is a desire in phase 2 to see what we can do in terms of seated dining. And that's why that group's working very hard. Now, obviously, there are a couple of different things that are important here. One is the overall metrics of health that need to be met for phase 2 to even happen. And the governor and lieutenant governor in a call today were stressing that this is not a plan driven by a fixed date. This is a plan driven by health metrics. But if we are to be able to start with phase 2 around June 8th or around June 8th, the idea would be to try to have some seating if possible.
Thank you. Nancy, we were on you when we transferred over there. You can stay on you here if you have more.
Okay, so thank you, Senator Tarr, for that, because that was my other question, was around parking. So if if there is a restaurant that wants to take up a lot of their parking lot, is there an opportunity, or maybe this is something that, again, when this communication goes out, is something that they can encourage them to submit what they're looking for in terms of parking, or when you were talking about closing streets off, I mean, it's probably maybe like a parklet or an alternative place for parking. So it's about parking, and also with this communication, I know we're talking about restaurants, but there's a lot of members that are calling me from the local gyms, the smaller gyms, the gyms, personal training facilities, places that ideally can probably, and Shelley, you can, if you could just confirm this, those places, like I know CrossFit called you, those places can right now do outdoor classes, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I worked with one of the CrossFit gyms on getting them to be able to open a, they're going to do outdoor classes, no more than 6 people. Everyone has their own equipment. They're going to do 2 classes a day and see how that goes. So where we have the nicer weather, they're able to do that on a smaller level. So any of the local gyms that wanted to do something like that, or yoga outside, things like that, they can do that now.
And it's 10 and under, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So
this class was doing 6.
Exactly. So that's just something that, again, just needs to be communicated out to, the greater community. Things like that. We have dance studios that, are calling, wanting.
No, the dance studios, they're more classroom based. That wouldn't be considered a gym.
So they could not come to you with a proposal if they wanted to do dance classes outdoors, similar to a personal trainer?
No.
No?
No.
Hey, Nancy, can I interrupt you real quick? Yeah, I'm sorry. And we'll stay on this line of discussion, but I want to make sure we have Shelley here. Representative Robertson, did you have something you wanted to offer in at this point?
Well, I appreciate, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add in, as it popped up in my mind when Nancy brought up the gyms, because we had a spurt of folks, not just in Wilmington, but also in Tewksbury, and I'm sure Senator Tarr has seen it at other parts of his district, with these requests, particularly for micro gyms. I was aware, but I kind of classified them in the gym. So as you members in the community are encountering these business owners, like in Nancy's case with the dance studio, or these business owners in various retail spaces, restaurants, or what have you, that are looking for reflection and consideration by the governor's reopening committee. A good piece of advice that I've seen from my colleagues, and it's something that I've been discussing with small business owners that have been calling in, saying that I feel like I was kind of lumped into the wrong category. I want to be able to host classes outside. I want to do X, Y, or Z. The state is very much taking a look at this through an industry lens. Now, as one of our retailers reached out, a mom and pop store, the competitor typically tends to be a much larger retail floor spaces, more along the lines of Targets or what have you. There was particular frustration there because they were moving heaven and earth to put in the social distances, things that, Shelley and her counterparts across the Commonwealth look at. So as a committee, if you have these folks, the small businesses looking to have considerations of how the phases are impacting them and how we might be able to help them, again, it's very important to take this look through an industry lens rather than just one individual location. And I'm just saying this now because I don't want to say it was a waste of time when folks reached out to us, but we did that by individual location, and it simply just doesn't get the attention that we as a committee need to bring to our local businesses. So if someone reaches out to you, like the dance studio, for example, and says that I want to work with the governor and his committee with the local and state government to alter my business so I can protect lives while also maintaining a livelihood, they need to reflect that, again, not as just their one location, but everything across the board. As Mrs. Newhouse probably knows, and this is just as of 2 days ago, the state has only about 28%, I believe, and Bruce, Senator Tarr might remember the exact figure. I think it was roughly something about 28% of our ICU capacity is back now, but that's after expansion. So we are moving in the right direction, but that's just to provide a little context of why we're taking still a very cautious approach with this phase.
Thank you, Representative.
So that's a good point, Dave. What I've been telling people and what Secretary Keneally tells us to do is to have these businesses as an industry, again, have these businesses fill out that online form that's on the reopening site. So I know they've been doing it. I've been doing it for them. So, they do say on a weekly, I do feel confident that they're reading all of them, and you know, we'll be tweaking some things shortly.
All set, Nancy, for a moment?
Yep.
I want to seize the opportunity to ask questions of Shelley if there are any. Suzanne, you're next on my grid here. Whoops, and you're muted. Hold on. John, or did you do that yourself?
I did that myself.
Okay.
I don't have anything at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Maybe a little later.
Well, we got all kinds of stuff to talk about.
Yep.
Valerie?
No, I think I don't think I have any comments at this point. I think, as I said before, I think it'll come down to the details of each restaurant, and you know, we'll have to figure out the parking issue, and parking, kind of containing how many, what distance, on, you know, grass surfaces, paved surfaces. We'll just have to review on a case-by-case basis, I think.
May I ask, Valerie, I don't know who to ask this of, but in some cases, a restaurant may be operating in a facility that's owned by someone else. So, you know, does the landlord have to get involved in authorizing the use of the parking lot if it's a shared parking lot with other industries, you know, other businesses in the plaza, so to speak? And I don't want to add wrinkles to this, but we want to act as quickly and swiftly as possible to the benefit of the business without, you know, causing a detriment to the neighboring businesses.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. When there's a shared area, I think definitely the property owner should be involved, so that you know, we know that they have permission to use that space, and that it won't be impacting others.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess that if we're going to develop some type of a form or a checklist or something like as Nancy mentioned, I think that might be one of the things we need to include.
I'm gonna go to my other call, but I'm not gonna leave this meeting. I'm like dual computers going.
Wow, you are.
So I will mute myself.
Okay, she already got muted. So whatever you just said sounded great.
Mike, I have a question too, and I think maybe she would have been the person to answer it. And this, I think Representative Tara said they can only use up to 25% of their capacity going forward, at least through this phase. My question is, and I'm thinking of Greg's because that's where I go to get my subs. You know, they virtually have no indoor seating or very, very little, and yet they have room outside in their big parking lot compared to the size of the building to put more, to actually expand their seating by moving outside. Would they then be restricted? So if they can only seat, you know, say 15 inside, well, let's make it easy. If they could only fit 20 inside now, can they only now, you know, put 5 outside or something, or could they go to 30 or 40 outside if they can do it?
So that's exactly why they're trying to switch from saying we're going to use a percentage of indoor seated capacity to a performance standard about distancing. So it's too soon yet to say, because the subgroup is still working on the guidance to accompany the reopening. And it's important to understand that every business sector that gets permission to reopen gets assigned specific guidance to them. And so the restaurant guidance is in development right now, but there has been a shift away from having that guidance say it's going to be a percentage of licensed seating capacity, and to saying we're going to look more at distance that you can maintain. So anything I could say right now would be hypothetical, so I hope you'll treat it as such, but it seems like it might offer a lot more flexibility than just a straight percentage requirement.
Okay.
Hey, Bob, are you still there? Your face went off screen, but your name's still on it. I want to make sure I give Bob, Greg, and Tom an opportunity to chime in if they feel so inclined to do so. And it seems maybe they don't. They might have paused.
Yeah, I'm still here, Mike.
Oh, okay, great.
It's Rob Oliveri.
Hi, Rob. Anything that you wanted to chime in at this stage of the game while we have Senator Tarr and Representative Robertson? We did lose Shelley, but we're on this subject about restaurants and the flexibility, hopefully, of allowing them to have some outdoor and do some things that they normally wouldn't be able to do with the current law.
I only had one question, and only because I'm doing this, but So I'm making a table that's going to fit in the back of my truck. And I put a floor in there so I can have outdoor dining at different restaurants. And I know in New Hampshire, they are doing that in some places where you can, you know, they'll serve you, and they're designating some areas, I guess. And if you have outdoor seating that you bring for yourself, like a vehicle, a table, and chairs, you can stay in the bed of your truck and dine outside.
That sounds like a New Hampshire thing.
I would do it here. I just made the table.
I'm gonna get hate mail now. Yeah, that's an interesting.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
I don't know. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? I don't know about the bed of the truck, but what if you bring your own table? Can you set it up?
Yeah, good point.
I doubt it.
Creativity.
Senator Tarr, any interesting thoughts about that, or are we?
Well, it's an interesting thought to start. So I don't know how I can embellish on that, but I would say that there are restaurants that I've seen where folks are actually eating in the parking lots. And so an example that I know that the representative would also be familiar with is our good friends over at Kowloon on Route 1 in Saugus. They have people eating in the parking lot, and that's happened to such an extent that they've actually asked the local licensing authorities to allow them to have essentially sort of car hop service. And they're thinking of even having some live entertainment to entertain the folks that are eating in their cars. So, you know, it seems to me that those kind of things are going to happen. I haven't heard any specific prohibitions against it within, again, the requirement that there be social distancing. So, for instance, I would assume that the people that are sitting around a picnic table in the bed of a pickup truck would need to be folks that are cohabitating and not a mixture of folks from different households. But if you maintain those kind of things, it seems to me that it's happening now. And I've seen it in a lot of different locations where people will bring a blanket and put it on the ground, or a picnic table. I do think that presents an issue for the local building department in terms of what can be allowed on the property. But once you get past that, I don't think there's anything that specifically prohibits it.
It's fascinating. People get
Sounds
creative.
like you're doing takeout in your car is what it sounds like to me. You're just doing takeout in your car instead of
Right.
driving it home, sitting in your car eating it. So
Right. Yep. So that's the only really question I had, and I didn't know if that was a Shelley question or not. That's my table. Can you guys see it that I made with?
Oh,
So it's just a folding table.
Oh yeah.
And I put a
Look at
piece
that.
on top, and then I have a floor that I made out of just a piece of plywood to put in the bed of the truck so it'd be flat. But
you could rent that thing out, Bob.
You may want to get some patent protection before showing that on TV.
I don't think so, but
Yeah,
that's when you're retired. I guess you get. And thank you, Senator, for answering that. I do appreciate that input.
You're welcome.
So Mike, I had another question about that. So when we're talking about open space, and I know this was in my email, but open space in terms of, you know, maybe putting the picnic tables on the town common or Yentl Farms, which I know isn't open yet, but Yentl Farms are some of the fields that we have in town. So one, you know, it could maybe encourage more people to actually do takeout and curbside if they had a place to go and sit outside maybe. So is that something that is doable in the near future?
Well, I know, Nancy, I know what you're alluding to. I know that I think the town of Needham is putting in place a policy, and I don't have the details in front of me, but exactly what you said. So tables in a couple of parks in town where folks can go to the local restaurant. It's just like takeout, but they can go and dine in a communal sort of social atmosphere rather than just taking it home, which we've all been doing. So this gives you sort of that kind of hybrid, that middle of the road kind of ground for those places perhaps that don't have the physical ability to do outdoor dining at their location. And so that's a limiting factor for them. But if we were able to accommodate those restaurants with some centralized location, Rotary Park, town hall, not town hall, but any of the number of different parks. So it's an interesting idea. I wasn't sure it was going to come up this evening, but I think it's worth having a conversation. I don't know if our representatives have seen that in their other communities, or if that question has been asked that you know of, Valerie or Jeff.
I have seen the draft statement. I think it was a press release from the town of Needham. I do have an email into Kate Fitzpatrick, who's a colleague, the town manager down there, just to find out how it's being handled. But I think it's something that's worth considering. I'd certainly want to have a conversation with the relevant department heads. I note, just looking at the piece they have here, that they provide the tables, the trash receptacles. It's expected that the patrons essentially clean up after themselves. There is no, it notes here, there's no hand washing stations or restroom facilities. So, those are somewhat limiting constraints, but I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
And I just don't want, and again, we're talking about restaurants, but when we mention the fact that gyms or yoga studios can do outdoor classes, but they might not have the space at their location. So is that an option to do it at one of those fields or open spaces as well?
So in terms of yoga and so on, some of these dance classes and so on, is the question whether those can be done at, say, Rotary Park or Town Common?
Yeah, so we're saying right now that these smaller gyms and yoga studios can perform outdoor classes as of even now with 10 or fewer people. So, I mean, I know, can they go to a field or, the common and do it there if they didn't have the space at their location to do it outdoors? Or if they just have a parking lot, outside their front door?
Well, in terms of town spaces, I guess starting with that, I would want to defer to Shelley. I do recall there was a situation that came up a couple of years ago where someone was looking to do some kind of outdoor activity. I forget now whether it was an exercise program or some other similar program on the town common. And curiously enough, in looking at there's some rules and regulations, somewhat dated, but with regard to the use of the town common. And as I recall, and I'd want to look at it again, there were some restrictions in terms of permitting for-profit organizations to engage in activities on the town common. So that would be something that the Board of Selectmen would have to consider if they were seeking to modify those requirements, that whether on a permanent or temporary basis. In terms of, generally speaking, other places around town, if people were going to have programs out in parking lots and so on, again, the sense I had from Shelley, and she's really the point person on this, is that dance studios, for example, are limited at this point, and I don't know the particulars behind that, so I hesitate to make any guarantees without having first had a conversation with her.
Thank you, Jeff. Hey, Greg, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to Tom. Sorry, Greg, if you're listening. Tom Card, are you able to hear me and chime in if you care to?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
So just from listening to everybody, it seems like most of what we want to do for Wilmington businesses is kind of at the whim of what the governor and everybody's doing, and that's fine. I completely understand that. The big question I have, is there anything that we can do, because during times like right now, everybody, and I think it was mentioned earlier, we kind of start focusing on our own businesses and our own families, which is completely normal and something we should all do even during the best of time, trying to save more and that type of thing. However, is there something that we can do as an economic committee, promote people to go maybe get takeout or do something to buy something from a local person, maybe go to Dan instead of Lowe's if you're trying to do a project, or just something, and I'm just using him as an example, just something local, and just use the Wilmington stores, that type of thing. Is there anything that we can do just to promote Wilmington as a whole?
I sure hope so. I think that's part B of our conversation tonight is and talking about what is the Economic Development Committee supposed to be. I think we spent a fair amount of time in the early formation of this committee about what we believed it was supposed to be and what our mission was. And I think given the pandemic and the current climate, we're going to have to pivot and maybe be something else, at least for the foreseeable future, as we alluded to earlier. So, Tom, I'm gonna ask you to put that thought process on hold, because I do believe it's going to be part of our conversation this evening to talk about strategically what we can do. I think we're, as we've always mentioned, we're an advisory board without any real teeth here. So I hope that we can come out of this tonight with some recommendations to make, perhaps to the Board of Selectmen, of some policy changes or some adaptations to the way things are handled to be nimble and be able to make some decisions quickly. And it sounds like Shelley and the town manager and Valerie are on board there. So that's really the good news. But then the rest of it will be, how do we promote our local businesses? Certainly the Chamber of Commerce is a large component of that. But the Chamber is really promoting Chamber members. So we need to think about the larger business community here. So again, I want to have that conversation, but I want to make sure we finish with this sort of this.
Yeah, that's fine. That's just the only feedback that I had. So.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. Go right ahead.
Although, please, I wanted to point out, and I'm sure as this comes up even pre-pandemic, I just want to take a moment and let anyone know that might be watching on WCTV or the other business owners that might be in tune. And you had come, goodness, it seems like forever ago. I think, when did you and I meet to talk about how to promote Wilmington's talent workforce and spare area from the SBA? And I know Senator Tarr and I have been keeping an eye out to see the SBA currently, right, their focus is, of course, is the EIDLs, the Paycheck Protection Program, what have you. But just for anyone that's watching out there, Chair Shampoo, on behalf of the committee, has already been thinking about promoting these small businesses, not just from Wilmington's own constituent or from our own, our own residential consumption, but also as a regional. So it's something that he's asked me and Senator Tarr and Rep. Gordon to keep an eye out for and see. And I suspect, though the conversation with the feds have been anything but concrete, that the SBA will be, once things return more toward normal and once things are more open again, be making available funding to promote particularly hard-hit regions like Wilmington and what have you. So I think we'll have an opportunity there when it comes almost to a way of advertising and promoting our own Wilmington businesses. So fingers crossed that the federal government follows through with this promise. We'll see how it comes out in the next few weeks of Congress reconvening.
Thank you, Representative. Yeah, it's as I alluded to a little while ago with Senator Tarr, the wheels of government sometimes don't move as quickly as we'd like them to, but it's good that the wheels are turning, and that's the most important thing. So thank you for sharing that perspective. Mr. Bendel, I don't know if you're still there. I want to make sure you have an opportunity to chime in on the subjects that we've covered so far. I think we put him to sleep. Or he's putting his kids to sleep. That's all right. I know we'll have ample opportunity to chat with Greg. What I think, I wanted to cover the health related issues and some of that stuff about specifically on the restaurants. And I feel like we've fleshed that out a little bit. We'll review the conversation and perhaps write up a summary and we'll talk about what we do with this information before we finish with tonight's meeting. But I guess I want to punctuate sort of the end of the conversation as it relates to Ms. Newhouse. I also want to make sure that Senator Tarr and Representative Robertson are encouraged, and we'd love to have you hang in there and listen with us all night long. But I have a hard stop at 8, I hope, to hit that right on the nose. Love to have you stay with us as we're going to go into other aspects of our agenda, which include what the Wilmington Economic Development Committee ought to be. We had spent I'm saying this now for the Senator and the Representative's benefit. We had spent a fair amount of time in the early stages of our creation as a committee, which was now almost exactly a year ago, really defining what the committee would be and writing a mission statement, which you would think that should be a couple of minutes work, and it turned out to be 2 full meetings. But I believe that we did a very good job. I'm proud of the mission statement as we accomplished it. And of course, it was written at a time that was pre-pandemic. No one would have ever thought that we would be dealing with this. And so now we are in a pandemic, and I guess the question is, what should the Economic Development Committee be, and how can we best serve the community of Wilmington, and I guess specifically the business community of Wilmington. So I think that's the navigation of how this meeting will go from this point forward. Love to have feedback and input from your perspectives on Beacon Hill, but I guess I'm going to sort of start to go. That's kind of part 2 of our agenda here. I guess I will ask you before if you decide you want to leave us, what are you hearing exclusive, not necessarily specifically on the restaurant front, as we just sort of alluded to, but as we go through the 4 phases, and I don't know, John, if you want to pop those phases up on the screen. I had the 4 phases of the reopening plan of the governor's, and I asked John to have it ready to pop on screen so we could sort of talk about how the community and how the businesses, which businesses are in each phase. And as we do that, I guess I'll ask the senator and the representative to just share with us what conversations are happening on the Hill with your colleagues, with representatives from the executive branch about how to do this. And maybe that's duplicative, and I'm asking you to repeat yourself from things you've already said, but what can the businesses expect from your perspective? I think most of us probably watch the governor's press conferences each day and in hopeful anticipation for the next announcement, what's going to happen next. I guess I only know what I see on television and what I hear, but I wonder if there's additional content that at least I was very interested to hear your perspective from your respective roles as a senator and representative. So I'll shut up and I'll let you guys chime in if there's more content to share.
So I would add a couple of things, Mike, and I'm happy to hang out and listen for a little while to the rest of the discussion too. I think it's wonderful that this committee exists, and I'm very encouraged by the conversation that I've heard tonight. So I want to hear about the future of the group. One of the things that I think needs clarification is that the decisions that are being made around reopening are executive decisions. We have a lot of folks that call us and want to try to influence those decisions, and that's fine. And the representatives and I are happy to advocate for positions and information that's offered to us. But this is not, the reopening is not a legislative process. And frankly, I don't think you would want it to be. If we had to legislate the different phases and the different businesses that were included in the phases, we probably wouldn't be able to make the kind of rapid progress that's able to be made at the executive level. However, that being said, it does limit the focus of decision making to the executive branch. So there are some trade-offs there. So we continue to receive information, and I think Representative Robertson mentioned this earlier. It's important to understand that this is an evolutionary process, so the plan is fluid. And so it's important that folks continue to send their information and their thoughts to the Reopening Advisory Board. And there's a place you can do that on mass.gov so that we keep the conversation going. It isn't as if this plan was done on May 18th and it's set in stone. It's not at all. It's very fluid, and that's an important thing to understand. I think the second thing is to think about the factors that we've talked about. And if you look at the dashboard, and I printed it out, so I have it here. If you look at the trends, only 2 of them are in the green area. And so we still are very much in a stage of transition here. While the surge may be behind us, the pandemic is a long way from being behind us. So for instance, if you look at some of the metrics, the 7-day weighted average of the positive test rate, that's down by 72%. So that's moving in the right direction. The 3-day average of number of COVID-19 patients in the hospital, that's down by 41%. again, moving in the right direction. The number of hospitals using surge capacity, there you go. Thank you for putting that up, John.
Thank you, John.
So if you look at these, and I'll stop reading them because you can read them for yourselves, they're all moving in the right direction. But if you look at number of deaths, for instance, there's been a bit of a sawtoothing effect where they've gone up a little bit, gone down a little bit. So we're still in a very uncertain situation. So I would just reiterate the fact that this is a reopening effort that will be driven by health metrics and not time necessarily. So we need to look at that. I guess the other thing is there is a lot of attention being paid to the things that we can do to support businesses. So one of the things that the representative and I have been advocating for is to make sure that folks have access to the things they need to reopen. If we tell everybody they could open tomorrow, but they need PPE and sanitizer, not everybody could open tomorrow. And so it's important that we try to facilitate that. So on the mass.gov website, there's a page where you can find Massachusetts vendors that sell the things that you need to reopen. And that's an important step. But we're also advocating for perhaps even more than that, to see if we can get the state to be a little bit more of a clearinghouse and take advantage of group purchasing and the purchasing power of the state to maybe purchase some of this stuff and then make it available at cost to businesses that need it. Now, that's a pretty ambitious idea, but it is one that we're discussing because one of the things we're concerned about is PPE has been hard to get for healthcare providers. Now we have a whole new category of folks going into the market looking for it in the face of businesses. And so we need to make sure, thank you, John, you're staying pace with me. I'm very impressed. But we need to make sure that we don't have businesses competing against each other, and we don't have healthcare sector folks competing with businesses. So we're trying to sort that out, and it's very important. And then the other thing that we've been hearing a lot about is the issue of price gouging on things that the hospitals need and that some of the businesses may need. And so we're trying to put together a bill around that still allows for some flexibility, because obviously when supply chains tighten, prices go up. That's supply and demand. But we want to make sure that no one's taking unfair advantage of the situation. And the Attorney General has issued emergency regulations around this. And we are trying to make those regulations statutory as well and send a clear message that people shouldn't be using this time to engage in price gouging. So the main decisions about how we reopen are being made by the executive branch with information from the Reopening Advisory Board. But the legislature has been looking at all the things around reopening to see how we can make sure that we facilitate it and that it goes smoothly. And of course, as has been referenced already at this meeting, a lot of things that we're thinking about are dependent on what the federal government does. So for instance, the House of Representatives today took action on trying to give more flexibility to the payroll protection plan loans, because we've heard that from a lot of businesses that they're too limited in terms of their restraints. And so we don't know what's going to happen with that. So like all of you, we're watching the federal government very closely as well. But if I had to try to summarize what we're doing, it's looking at a lot of the things around the reopening. And I think that Dave would agree with me, Representative Robertson and Representative Gordon, that one of the things we're very eager to hear are suggestions from all of you about impediments that might be out there and things that we can do to make things work a little bit better. And a lot of those may wind up being temporary for the duration of the public health emergency, but so be it. So we're really interested in hearing about things that you see that might be obstacles that you need to deal with. And so I don't.
I've heard that, I read it in the Globe, that Middlesex County is 11th in the nation with having bad results of the virus, deaths and so forth. That was on the front page.
You know,
Hey, Carol, your
guide
signal seems to be weak for the moment here, Carol. I don't know if your Wi-Fi is kludgy or something, but you're kind of in and out. Now you're muted. But I think that the observation was that Middlesex County has
Middlesex County has bad numbers. Is anything being impacted by the fact that Middlesex County has bad numbers, really bad numbers?
Interesting.
Well, I think if I remember, Middlesex, Essex, and Suffolk County are the three hotspots here in the Commonwealth. And it's might be surprising, right, when we typically think of developed areas, right? It's New York, Chicago, LA. Well, we're actually one of the most densely populated counties in the country, and actually we're one of the wealthiest kind of counties in the world. So when it comes to reopening, though, with respect, the governor is taking a look at and again, I kind of laughed to myself. There was a rule of thumb I learned as an aide: never talk after Senator Tarr. He always covers it thoroughly and better verb than you could do. But to go back to his point, right, the Governor Baker's looking at the health metrics of these. And I think because we had the concern out in the Berkshires early on with an outbreak there, but also that Middlesex in particular was hit hard after an initial conference outbreak, right, that we're kind of starting to trace the explosion of cases in Massachusetts back to. I don't think the weight of Middlesex will necessarily weigh us. Massachusetts is too small of a state to mirror things like, this is just my opinion, but Como, for example, in New York is letting upstate New York kind of break off. Again, Massachusetts, we can drive across in 2.5, maybe 3 hours without the traffic now in the absence of the pandemic. I think we're very much going to be tied together. It's not going to be a puzzle county style, if that's what you were asking. Forgive me if I misunderstood your question. I'll let you clarify if I misunderstood.
Well, Middlesex is number 11 in the country. I don't see this. Can you see that? Can you see it? No.
No.
All right. It's a map of the country, and it shows that our county in the entire country is number 11 with the cases per capita. So my question is, and I hope I'm not breaking up. My question is, will that impact Wilmington's ability to open? We're in a kind of a bad zone.
Again, and this is just from what I've seen is again Massachusetts' relative small geographical footprint. We might have to take local precautions, but that's more under Mr. Hall and Ms. Newhouse's purview if they choose to do so. But as you heard, Ms. Newhouse at the beginning of the call said she'll be following the governor, and all the discussion I've seen, though much of my focus has been constituent focused, but all of my everything I heard through the grapevine is Massachusetts is moving forward basically as a unified unit, and there won't be much discrimination, if any at all, between counties or even towns.
And I would jump in to confirm that, because I had this very conversation with the governor today about the fact that we are not doing reopening on a regional basis. We're doing reopening on a statewide basis. And the reason for that is because people are still mobile. And as the representative points out, we don't have a very large geographical footprint. And so that compaction means that we have to think about the state as a whole. So it's very unlikely that you will see a reopening plan be divided into regional subcomponents.
Thank you both for that. So it feels like there's a line there to maybe continue along the discussion here. So we talked about, and John, maybe this is a mission statement moment we can pivot into sort of talking about what we are and what we can be going forward. We've had, I think, a good discussion about some specifics. and Shelley and Valerie have given us some ideas about how businesses will be able to access the opportunity to have some outdoor seating, or maybe have some flexibility in the way that they can open their business as the phases continue along the way. But you know, when we started our mission a year ago as an economic development committee, we developed what you're looking at on screen here. I won't read it verbatim unless anyone wants to, or wants me to, or if someone would like to read it, chime in and they can do so. But we established the Economic Development Committee based on this notion that we should be promoting and be the outbound sort of proactive voice of the town of Wilmington to the greater business community, with really, I think, the thought of enticing the right kind of businesses, businesses that would support our economy, that would provide jobs, and would be, you know, be fitting with the fabric of our community. And I think some of those statements are in the mission statement itself. And while we should never turn our back on the idea of wooing or being attractive to would-be businesses, certainly their commerce continues to move on. I think it's appropriate for us to maybe have a discussion about, is it appropriate for us now to pivot our focus, at least for the time being and for the foreseeable future, on programs, communication, tools, whatever it is, benefiting the existing businesses, those that are already here, that are struggling to find a way to stay here and keep their business open. So I want to open up that conversation. I don't think we need to necessarily, at least in my view, I don't think we need to change the mission statement, but I think at least for the time being, we can state that our mission will be revised or changed to focus a little bit of energy on what I just mentioned. So I know, Suzanne, you had some conversation with me by email a week or so ago. So I'm going to start with you, if that's okay with you. It seems like maybe you had some thoughts on this, and I'll certainly be open to hearing them.
I think I would use the word expand the mission, and I think that would be maybe appropriate language. I also think that a lot of the objectives that we had when we did the survey, I think we can still hold on to those ideas and maybe support them even more so, as by creating kind of a more community atmosphere. The idea of, I think, of having picnic tables, for instance, is a great idea. We had talked about that also, and it may even be a place where people can have things delivered at, you know, picnic table number 3, and have them, you know, strategically, you know, put in different places in town where it's nice to sit down, you know, whether maybe it's at the library or, you know, at the town common, and have those, you know. So I think our ideas that we had at the beginning, we can still hold on to them. I don't think we should abandon them. I think we can actually take this opportunity to build on them and enhance them.
Suzanne, how would you, in what format in your mind would you see us making those recommendations? Again, we're an advisory board, so I guess we'd have to package up some type of a set of ideas and then make a presentation, I imagine, to the Board of Selectmen or Mr. Hull. Or what's your vision for how, because I agree with you, by the way. I just don't know how we get from these great ideas that come out of this conversation here tonight and maybe at our next Economic Development Committee meeting, how do we get those ideas down into something that we can execute on, given that we're not really an execution kind of committee?
Yeah, I think that we have to make recommendations to the appropriate boards, and yes, one of them would obviously be the Board of Selectmen, and, you know, and to the town manager. I think some of the guidelines that Representative Tarr and Representative Robertson and Senator Todd just spoke about, making information available to businesses, and maybe we could put it up on our website, and then, you know, put it out in the papers, put it out, you know, do a press release that we have this information available for people, with links to the state, you know, things like that where we can support. I can see us doing that. You know, we could do that without any. We don't have to depend on the Board of Selectmen or the town manager. We just have to come up with something and put it up on the website. So I think we could do that. And I think that would be really helpful because then there's a one portal in town where somebody can go, and if they need to speak about, you know, outdoor seating, we could direct them to Valerie. You know what I mean? So I think if we came up with I guess a letter to businesses, and a press release saying we have all this information here and you can come here to get that information, which would be the website. So I think that that would be a good start. And then there's the other ideas like the picnic tables and stuff like that. That would absolutely be in a different realm, and that would have to be something that I think we would have to go to the selectman and the town manager for.
Yeah, indeed. Creativity here, I think, is what we're looking for. I'm certain that some of our members of the Board of Selectmen have probably had some of these thoughts, and I suspect Jeff and Valerie and others in Town Hall are either having questions raised by them or have had some of their own ideas. So this idea of, I think we all need to be thinking creatively about what kind of things would be beneficial to businesses and are executable in a relatively short period of time. Here we are, it's almost June, and before we know it, we'll blink and it'll be September and it'll be getting cold. So we need to seize the opportunity to benefit these businesses as soon as possible.
And may I suggest, is there a way that we could actually reach out to businesses and see what kind of support they may need, as far as, you know, to make life easier, to, you know, I don't know.
But well, I love the idea.
Yeah, so if I could just speak up, I'm going to put my chamber hat on here. And so this is what I do on a everyday basis. So I work with 250 businesses in Wilmington and Tewksbury, and we just did a survey. So we have that information in terms of what we've been working with them on is, you know, things around all of the loans, the EIDL loan, the PPP, and then we have been helping to promote them via, you know, social media. We did a takeout blitz with gift cards for local restaurants for a month, promoting, you know, the whole curbside and takeout. We started that for the first month. So there's been a whole host of things that we've been doing over the last, you know, couple of months through this. I think the disconnect for me is the communication, I guess, between what I think this group or because again, I'm only hitting 250 businesses that are members. So we are missing the rest of the population of businesses in Wilmington, say. So as much as my members have been getting information on a daily basis about what's going on with the state, you know, other folks aren't. And, you know, I know that we meet monthly, so it's kind of, you know, it's kind of hard to keep this moving quickly, some of the initiatives that we want to do. But I'm certainly, you know, as from the chamber, eager to help all businesses at this point, that's for sure. And that's what I've been out there doing. So my disconnect has been kind of what I would love this group to be is that connection between the town and the chamber. Like, for instance, what we were just bringing up earlier on today, you know, there's businesses that are calling me asking for, you know, with questions all about the outdoor seating, with the process for that, with, you know, the gyms, all of those questions that are coming in every day. That's where I would love this group to be the kind of the conduit between the chamber, I guess, businesses in the town.
I think, you know, we were meeting once a month up until now. That was the schedule we had kind of agreed on during that period of time. I think perhaps, I don't want to burden folks, but if we're going to be writing up some recommendations, then ultimately wanting to make a presentation before the Board of Selectmen, we probably ought to meet again sooner than a month from today. I'm thinking about even as, you know, the beginning of first week of June, whatever that would be. I guess that's coming up, isn't it? Maybe the second week of June. Just so if we come up with any drafts this evening, perhaps, it's so hard because I just want to send out a draft email to all of you and have you come back to me with your edits, but I guess I can't really do that in this whole open meeting thing. But if we can construct a way to share a draft of a few documents and maybe someone can volunteer to do something, then we can meet again, refine that draft, and hopefully that becomes a sheet of recommendations that we can make to the Board of Selectmen and to Valerie and Shelley and others. you know, something I wanted to chime in on, and maybe it already exists and we just need to communicate it, is does town hall, and I don't know who it would be, and I don't want to ask anyone to volunteer for it, but is there an employee of the town that would be the point person for a business that has a concern or a question, or doesn't know how they're allowed to open, what they're allowed to do when they do open, when they're allowed to open. So, you know, they may go to the state's website and get some guidance there, but when it comes down to where the rubber hits the road here in the town of Wilmington, who do they call? And I suppose most people would probably start with the town manager's office and be directed to the right person. But can we as a committee broadcast and somehow communicate and share with the community who the right people are to be the first point person? Is such a thing possible?
Certainly, it's possible. I think you know, one of the things I hesitate to offer up a particular individual this evening. You know, the people that are clearly the most involved right now, Shelley Newhouse, obviously with all the health-related issues and has the best handle on the details associated with the restrictions and requirements. It's, you know, I would certainly want to have a conversation with whoever it is we decide internally to serve as that point person. The challenge obviously is that she's got a lot on her plate with everything else going on between the masks and all the coordination that's going on with everything associated with COVID at this point. So I think we can establish a point of contact, but let me give that some thought. And
absolutely, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. I really do appreciate it. I don't want to get anybody in trouble here, but Shelley in the background was, you know, chiming in on the chat and raising her hand saying that she'd be glad to do it. So you guys can talk tomorrow and formalize that. But
Okay.
It sounds like we might have an informal acknowledgement that Shelley would be the point person. We'll finalize and formalize. So
to that point, recognizing that everything that is being discussed this evening, there's a time sensitivity to it, obviously. Businesses are certainly looking to reestablish themselves or increase their presence given the setbacks they've had. I will get, once confirm with Shelley, we'll get that out ASAP.
Thank you very much. You know, I want to cycle back to this mission statement thing. Is it appropriate for us to draft something and put it, you know, on the website that says during COVID-19 or during the pandemic, the Economic Development Council will seek to do the following and state a few things? Or is that an unnecessary set of things that we need to add to our plate right now? It's not a rhetorical question.
Is there a way that we can let people know that we're actually here to support and help?
I think so.
Maybe, I mean, I think that's what we need to be. I mean, you know, as Nancy said, you know, kind of like a liaison.
Can I ask a question of maybe Jeff or I don't know, Greg, if you're there still? You know, if we were to put together some statement about what, you know, the Economic Development Committee is here during the pandemic, and we're doing the following. We are a resource in the following ways. Please, you know, visit our website for links to some of the state resources, et cetera, that kind of stuff. I don't want to wait 2 weeks to have a vote as to whether or not the language that's in that document is sufficient and acceptable to all the committee members, and then have it put up there for all the reasons that we've discussed tonight about the timeliness. Is there a way for a draft of something to be created by a member of this committee, shared with the members of the committee, and agreed upon outside of having a formal meeting like this?
You know, I think the approach might be to get someone or perhaps a couple members of the committee to agree to develop something and with the expectation that they could essentially run with it. I guess I'm hesitant to, when you get into a situation where the expectation is that everyone needs to agree to it, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess the long and the short of it is that we're trying to deal with transparency. So when you get conversations going back and forth via email, even as with something as innocuous as a document like that, I think we create issues with the open meeting law.
So could this, go ahead, Greg, thank you.
And one of the things that I just want to offer is we're happy to relay any message. We have a meeting coming up on the 8th, which, as you know, we'll be setting the agenda on the 4th. But from now until then, if something was to be drafted or created, we'd be happy to pump that out to the community at our next selectman meeting.
Thank you. We'll obviously, Greg, I'll stay in touch with you. Is this, I'm not trying to break the process, but if this body, a majority of the members of this body gave their okay to 3 of us, hypothetically, to 3 members, and said, okay, we trust that you 3 are going to represent and articulate our ideas. And so we're going to give you the go-ahead to go right ahead and write up a statement and place it on the website. We have the faith that you will do it consistent with our belief and our opinions on this. Is that a workaround to the open meeting, or are we still, am I just trying to break the system?
No, I think in that instance, and without getting attorneys involved, but my sense is, when you're in the case where you have a minority of the committee that's working on something, again, it's not, given the nature of what you're looking to do, I think you could give the go-ahead to 2 or 3 members of your committee as a subcommittee to develop this message and essentially send it out.
Okay. Thank you. And again, when we started, there was no specific urgency about the things that we were planning to do. We were doing surveys and gathering data that we hoped we would use that data in formulating a plan. And then Mr. COVID decided to come and show up. So we're just trying to act as quickly as possible and nimbly as possible. So that is helpful. I'm talking a lot. I want to make sure that Pat or Valerie or other members have an opportunity to chime in here. Rob, we haven't, because I don't see your face, I don't think to ask you any questions. So don't take that personal. I'm sorry about that. So I want to definitely make sure that we're capturing the desire to sort of redefine our purpose, not change the mission statement, but I think, Suzanne, to your point, enhance what we do as a committee to the community. And then, start doing it. Start getting some of those links out. Start being a resource for information. Start advocating on behalf of our businesses to the Board of Selectmen and to the town management, and being maybe a holding house for some of those ideas by the business community. They can come to us if they have an idea. Certainly, they can go to Shelley or the town manager directly. But we can be another resource for them. We can gather some of that information and then share it with the administration. So those are bullet points. Yeah.
Mike, can I just ask?
Yes,
Can
Carol.
you hear me okay? I switched over from my iPad to my computer. Can you see me and hear me okay?
Can't see you at the moment. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. So I guess what I was wondering if, as far as communicating, I know a lot of the stuff that I see about the town is via, I hate to say it, but via Facebook.
Yeah,
I'm a big Facebook user. And maybe we could kind of, use multiple tools. I don't know how many people actually go to the town webpage or the Economic Development Committee website. I bet hardly anyone. But I think more public ways of us communicating would be better. The town communication tools like the Apple and so forth.
Certainly,
Apple TV,
social media.
whatever.
I think we all know that intuitively. That social media is where people gather a lot of their information these days.
Right.
Level. And you know, I think there was probably always going to be a social media presence for this committee. Maybe now's the time, right? I wasn't sure when that was going to take place, and I don't know that we ever had it as an agenda item in the past, but it certainly seems to make sense now.
Yep.
Yeah. So
it could even be something kind of catchy, like, hey, we've changed, you know, we temporarily have changed gears to service the existing businesses. Well, we kind of have put our, you know, have to slow down on the development side of things. Just kind of open with that or something. It's, I don't know, with social media, things have to kind of concise to the point and right. So that's just not.
Yeah, you went bad again on us, Carol. Sorry, your signal went hooey again. But I think we got the nature of what you're saying. Certainly, social media makes an awful lot of sense. I guess we'd have to talk about a little bit in what form that takes from a legal perspective, and you know, who would be the person that posts on it, and you know, what would be the process by which those posts would get produced. But let's not let go of that idea. I think it's worthwhile.
Just to chime in here, this is John O'Neill, the IT director. Any sort of social media account sort of on behalf of the town or the board or committee will need to be archived. So you definitely want to keep us in the loop because we'll need those records.
Thank you, John.
That's right. Going to the public records law, we need to be mindful that things created by the town need to be maintained by the town.
And that's what I was alluding to. I knew there'd be nuances to this. It's not just a matter of posting on a social media account the way it would be in this environment. There would, I imagined we would have to adhere to some oversight. So yeah, definitely. We will, I'll have more conversation about that and be prepared. Perhaps we can start the bones of the idea offline and have it as an agenda item on our next meeting to formalize a presence. I think there's probably more on that discussion to have and that we have time for this evening.
Yeah, and Mike, I certainly offer the chamber up. We have a whole COVID page that has all the resources, so there's definitely not, you know, a need to kind of reduplicate efforts. We can just, you know, pass that all along.
Thank you, Nancy. You know, that creates an amazing opportunity to transition the conversation into how can our organization, this group, collaborate with the Chamber of Commerce. You know, the Chamber of Commerce is in support of its member businesses, and the Wilmington Economic Development Committee was formed to be the proactive arm of and the voice of the business community to the town government. Two different focuses, really the same constituency by and large, except that we don't have members. Every business in the community is a member of our mission, as it were, as opposed to the Chamber of Commerce, which does have members. People pay for the services that they get from the chamber. So, Nancy, you just alluded to it. We certainly don't want to get into the business of duplicating efforts. And one of the primary reasons you're on this committee is your vision and your knowledge of the business community for a long time now. You are certainly beneficial from your knowledge base and your experience. But how do we not duplicate your efforts, but how do we complement them, and how can you complement this committee's? And I don't have the answer, by the way. I'm offering up that question because I think it's a valid one. You know, if I'm a business in town, do I go to the chamber or do I go to the town website, the Economic Development Committee? Where are my resources? And how can we work together to move the ball forward and not against each other? And I open that up to you, Nancy, and to anyone else that might have some thoughts on it.
So I put together that COVID page because there wasn't one place that I could find that had kind of all of the links and all of the up-to-date information that our business community would need. But you know, what I would have loved this group to do is to have that on the town website. So again, it's not just for chamber members, it's for the businesses to go to, you know, a business page on the town website that was COVID related and had every update that was coming in from the state. So then me as a chamber could actually go to that page and communicate that town information out to, you know, my business members, from there. And the same thing when it comes to, this process we were talking about earlier in terms of, filling out a form or, these case by case things. It's something that I would refer my chamber members to the town website to, as kind of a resource for them there. The other questions I get a lot from my members when they start calling me about, tax implications for a down economy, for the businesses. And they're asking me those type of questions. So it would be nice for me to be able to either refer to the appropriate person or to provide them some type of direction there. I know that, municipal funds and grants, things like that are coming out or maybe coming out through all of this COVID. Is that an opportunity for for some of my members and business community? So, the larger, what I'm trying to say, the larger business as a whole, the bigger picture in terms of government type stuff is what I personally would find helpful from this group. Again, with the chamber hat on for my businesses.
That sounds really good. And I have the same vision, I think, that you do, Nancy. I don't know how to execute on it. What I mean by that is we don't have, certainly Shelley has, and perhaps after, conversations at town hall, it'll be formalized, and, she would be a point person for businesses to reach out to if they had questions about their opening up processes, et cetera. But in terms of building this content and maintaining and administering it, I struggle with how that would take place. We're a volunteer board, and so it continues to be a question of how can we build content on our Wilmington Economic Development Committee website that's useful and beneficial to the community, while also, having our day jobs. So that's, I wrestle with it. I don't have the answers.
Yeah, and so to that point, I don't want to, I don't want, because I know the calls that I get from the business community, they're specific to PPP questions, and I know Dave's getting a lot of these. I'm sure, Senator Tar gets a lot of these, but, they're very specific questions to the PPP and the unemployment insurance and PUA, all of that stuff that we're trying to resolve for them. So I just want to be careful if this group is going to go out saying that, we're kind of a resource for you in that aspect, everything COVID related, but then not be able to, have the time to follow up or get back to them.
Yeah, it's a valid point. I don't know.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Representative, please.
I understand. I think Nancy has a great point where we want to strike a balance to ensure that we're not kind of opening up Pandora's box, I guess, for it. But I think one of the ways that we can balance that, and we have, I'd say arguably here, second to none, right? We have Senator Tar, myself from the state, with our federal contacts, with Nancy over at the chamber, Mr. Hall. I see Greg Bendel, who I think probably talks more about helping businesses than anyone else locally. I understand that. I think we can kind of cooperate though, and I think, I don't want to be too overly optimistic, but I'm confident. I think between our network, we should be able to balance something along that line. If we do publish this and push it as hard, I don't want to jinx ourselves, but I dare say there's probably very few things at this point that if a small business came forward to us with a problem, not one of us in the group would not have seen something at least similar. So I do ask if we do message it though, that we coordinate across each of our platforms. I know Mr. Bendel graciously said, right, if we come up with something that he would pump it at the next select board meeting. And I think a uniformity across the board would kind of help direct folks when we triage their issues, right? So as my aide and I have said, we've gotten a lot of different calls. Doesn't matter which one of us take it, but we've kind of assigned caps. So that's something else maybe in the next meeting too. like Senator Tar and I can speak to some of the EIDL or PPE source questions. Right, obviously, Mr. Champ, excuse me, Mr. Hall and Ms. Newhouse would go more towards some of the local stuff there. But yeah, I honestly, I feel pretty confident, to be honest. We could pretty much handle anything that would come in out of a small business in our area at this point.
I think we need to, we need to start somewhere. I'm not sure where that somewhere is, but I think having a comprehensive set of links to sources of information on our website, just so people don't have to hunt. If I'm from a small business and I go to my municipality's website, I hope that I can find a good, at least directions, as opposed to Google searching and being navigating all over the internet. I will compliment the state. I'm motioning like this because I have another computer on my screen, and I have the mass.gov on my screen. And I compliment the mass.gov site. It's reasonably intuitive, and I can find information there as I'm looking for it, especially as it relates to COVID-19 and what's happening with the reopening and what the measurements are. But if I'm a local business, I want local answers. And where do I get that information? So I think we can start as a centralized point. One of those links would be to the Chamber of Commerce. Nancy, you've gathered so much useful information that I think a lot of that should be and can be made available to all businesses, whether they're members or not. Your communication efforts outbound to your members continues to be the primary, I think, reason that those businesses choose to join the chamber. But if there's a business that hasn't chosen to join or is reluctant to, or whatever, for whatever number of reasons, I think some of the content that is there, which isn't being developed by the chamber, it's really just being shared by the chamber, can also be shared by the Economic Development Committee. So I guess we will try to explore somehow populating that and gathering the information and then populating it on the site. And so, yeah, I guess, yeah, we'll look at ways to do that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, please. Thank you, Senator.
If I might indulge the group for just a moment, I have 3 thoughts that I think might be helpful. No, I guess the point that I would make is I think the day-to-day troubleshooting that happens is probably not the best activity for this group. I think there are folks on the call that do that every day. So it seems to me that there are 3 really important functions that this group could play. And the first one is probably the reason it was originally founded, and that is policy development and to inform the decisions of town government. So one thing you might consider doing is sort of maybe a monthly update, to the Board of Selectmen about business issues during the pandemic, so that you can continue to keep the board updated and it feels that it has good information and also that the town manager does. So I think, making a regular report to the board is important. Second, identifying policies that could be executed by the town and maybe being both a genesis point for those, but also taking suggestions and teasing them out so that they can be presented in a form that's actionable to the board and to the town manager. And then information sharing, which you can never have enough of. So I think there could be cross connections electronically across a platform that you might create that links us all to each other. So I think, a reporting function to the Board of Selectmen and the town manager, number 1. Number 2, policy development, and to advise the board about that. And number 3, information sharing. And then point number 4, and this one I think may need some more thought, would be advocacy. And so if something is before a board in municipal government, whether it be the Board of Selectmen or another board, this board could also help with advocating for things that would be beneficial to businesses. And I think if you did those things, you would be staying out of everybody else's wheelhouse, so there isn't a lot of redundancy, but you'd be performing a really important set of functions.
Thank you, Senator. I really appreciate your perspective on that because it's hard sometimes where it's this big nebulous world, and I think everyone has the right idea, everyone certainly the right intention. It's how to put that into a format that makes sense, that actually, you know, creates progress. We certainly don't want to create more mess. No one wants to have to step through more stuff to get things done. On the contrary, we're trying to be a tool to get things done faster or more efficiently. Greg, does that, did what Senator Tar just said, I mean, to me, it made a ton of sense, and I want to make sure that I'm not accepting on behalf of the committee, but you represent the Board of Selectmen. Does that make sense to you from your perspective?
Yeah, I would concur with all four of those points. I think they're great. And from my perspective as being a member of the Board of Selectmen, I would welcome an update like that. I think that the Board of Selectmen finds themselves in a very unique position right now. Like the rest of the world, we're dealing with COVID, but we're also anxiously awaiting town meetings. So we have some gaps that we're looking to fill. And what we've been trying to do is put out some good things that have happened in the community and keep people informed with what's going on, what town services are available as this goes along. And I think that this would be something that would be very appropriate to inform the board and more importantly, the community. If to invite someone like yourself or maybe Nancy or the both of you to come in and update the board. And I think I'd be happy to talk to Jeff. And if I had to guess, he'd be in agreement that that would be very beneficial for a future meeting. We meet on the 8th and then again on the 20, at the end of the month. 22nd. Thank you, Jeff. Either one of those, we'd love to have you in.
Or on, as it were.
Love to have you.
No, fair enough. All right, so I don't know where we are. I'm sorry. I mean, I know where we are on the agenda, but in terms of actionable items, I always like to leave a meeting with 2 do's, and I'm not sure what my 2 do is, or anybody else's for that matter. So I want to start delegating tasks to people. No, I'm kidding. But I want to make sure when we leave here tonight that we know that someone's going to be, you know, all right, I'll do that, and I'll do that, and then we can decide on when to meet again, and hopefully we can show the fruits of some of that labor. So
well, certainly, let me just jump in, I guess, with a couple of things that I've picked up on. The issue has been raised about the prospect of providing tables in some of our public places. You know, I can have that conversation internally. As I said, we do have some tables, whether we can provide more. I mean, I think it's certainly a good idea, particularly in this set of circumstances and beyond. If we can create spaces for people to enjoy a meal, whether it's from Ezzo's or Wilmington House or wherever it might be. So let me take that one and run with that.
Thank you, Jeff.
And Mike, I'll certainly commit to arranging to talk to Jeff and invite you guys in and leave it up to you as the chair, how you'd like that to go, whether it's you accompanied by others or just you on behalf of the board. Certainly would more than be happy to invite our state delegation as well if they'd like to be to join us.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, we'll touch base. I know the 6-8 seems a long time away, but it's not. So I want to make sure we have something meaningful. I don't want to come before you or to your meeting, have us come to your meeting without something really cogent to talk about. But maybe we can gather again as a committee to review any discussion topics we want to bring to the Board of Selectmen between now and then.
If I could, Mike, Mr. Chairman, I would just say that perhaps by that time we would be able to make that connect. Nancy asked some very good questions earlier that she's getting from her chamber members, and I'm hoping at that point we may be able to give them a little bit better of an answer, or at least point them in the right direction.
Thank you.
Certainly in the interim here, I'll have a conversation with Shelley. You know, quite frankly, one of the challenges that we have, and I don't know that we're unique completely, but we don't, as you know, have an economic development office. Some places have an economic development director, they have staff, and I would suspect, although I haven't talked to any of my colleagues who have these resources, that part of their role right now is perhaps shifted to providing the types of direct connects, so to speak, that Nancy has talked about. The reality is we don't have that person. We have certainly, Valerie is very familiar with many of these pieces, but quite frankly, she's got a lot of other projects that are taking time. I don't have to tell anybody about many of them, but she's doing double duty between conservation and planning and Princeton properties and a number of other issues, open space plan, all of those things are on her docket. And so it's difficult to have her, or quite frankly, even Shelley at this point, being dedicated to regularly updating a site with the ever evolving changes and resources. I mean, I think we can figure out ways to assist in that manner, but I don't know that I have someone that I can designate to really focus on that on a more regular basis.
Yeah, Jeff, I appreciate that. I recognize that's the case. And now you might recall that it is a discussion topic that you and I have had on a number of occasions through the years. I'm delighted we have an economic development committee, but perhaps in some future date, some future time, some future when post-pandemic, God willing, we can have that discussion, and perhaps this board can make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen about such a role. Who knows? Maybe that time will come, maybe it won't. But I appreciate your perspective on it. Senator Tarr, real quickly, and maybe Representative Robertson, in your respective districts, are you finding that communities do have some individual, is that a prominent, when I say prominent, is that a common role among some of your other towns? Like an economic development director or direct, administrator, or some role, some person that is an employee of the town that functions in that capacity? Or is it kind of a rare thing to see?
It depends on the size of the community. The larger communities tend to have community development departments that encompass business development and things of that nature. And the smaller communities, many of them have exactly the type of committee that you have that we're meeting with right now. So it really depends on the size of the community and the resources they're able to commit. I did just have a thought, though, that I'd like to throw out there, Mike, and that is, I wonder in terms of updating a website, if it might be possible to get somebody who's on a senior tax reduction program or some other volunteer, or maybe a younger person from the schools who is very adept at computer technology. It might be a great project for a student if you could collect the information and just have that person be able to update a website. Might be a great resource to call upon.
It's a great idea, Senator Tarr, and I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like maybe someone had brought that up as a discussion topic some months ago, and it was, again, pre-pandemic, so the urgency wasn't necessarily there, but I do appreciate bringing it up, and I think that's probably something that we could poll out to the school department or someone to see if there's that resources exists. How we would go about identifying that person, I guess we'd have to iron some of those details out. But it's a good one.
Can I just say, when Senator Tarr was speaking, I just decided, like you were saying, there's other communities. So I just did a quick search of the Burlington Economic Development webpage committee. And of course, they do have a hire there, I believe. I think that they have a full-time development person. But they have a big COVID-19 sign on their page, and then they have support and guidance for Burlington's businesses right underneath it. And I think that's what, something that we should, look into doing. And Mike, I'd be willing to help you out with that if you want some help, to come up with the material for that, if that's what you're looking to do.
I think it is. And okay. Let me be real clear. I'm delighted to be the chairman to navigate this conversation, but I can't do the stuff. It takes a village. So, yeah, Suzanne, if you're able and willing to take on some of that.
Yep, I can take on some of it.
Pull in resources wherever you need them. But that would be outstanding because, my bandwidth is stretched, to say the least. So I want everyone on the committee to be completely empowered to take on some of these tasks. That's the only way we'll get the stuff done, frankly. You know, we're getting late here, so my head's all over the board, but I want to make sure, I don't think we have any public comments, but I wanted to get to that portion of the meeting. Well, no, I'm sorry, we're in new business. So member statements and discussion about agenda items for the next or future meetings. So are there any specific discussion topics? I don't know when this next meeting will be. I think we have to talk about that as well. But at our next meeting, is there something that we know that we have to cover?
Well, Mike, I think if you're going to go before the Board of Selectmen, June 8th, maybe we should have another meeting very specifically targeted to what are you going to present to the selectmen, and you know, kind of flush out a little bit more, get some great ideas. But I too feel like we're a little lost on where do we go from here. I think we can do better. I just think I'm kind of overwhelmed with information at the moment.
Me too, Carol. Okay, I appreciate that. So what's Jesus, that's next week, so I'd have to get an agenda together. Okay, so that's not unreasonable, but maybe we could have a brief discussion next week just to talk about, and I'll talk to John about what our available dates are. So it might be something that I poll out to you guys over the weekend to find a day and time. So agenda item discussion, Board of Selectmen presentation topics. That would be agenda item number 1. Anything else it doesn't have to be for the next meeting, but anything specifically that we want to make sure we're covering? We want to, well, I'll leave it. Things that people want to have on a conversation about that we didn't converse about this evening?
Mike, I think it would be great, you know, as we're trying to represent the Wilmington business community, perhaps between now and the next meeting, let's all see if we can reach out to local businesses or at least get some observations and see how they're adapting to this new normal. You know, are there businesses that aren't able to open right now because of some of the restrictions, or are there businesses that can open, but they just can't right now because of, you know, the pandemic? So I think it'd be good to see some real world case studies of what's going on in our town, and perhaps that can help shape some of our future conversations, you know, regarding the Wilmington business community.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah.
And I want to add to that. I think that's a great idea. And I know somebody just interviewed Mark just for the store to get exactly that kind of information, just to see how it's been affected. And it was a Zoom meeting. And it was this one particular, I think she's posted somewhere, but it might not be a bad idea to see if people would be willing to just have a quick Zoom meeting or a phone call. I think people are willing to talk during this time, you know.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, individually, independently, and we're all out there, you know, conducting business, whether we're doing it electronically or face to face.
Right,
so,
right.
You know,
yeah.
As part of our membership on this committee, maybe we just ask a couple of extra questions.
Right.
But it might even, maybe it's just of the clerk who's working there. They observe the same
right.
stuff as the owner.
But where, you know, it is, you know, we're not seeing people as much as usual. And if it isn't so easy to go into places or whatever, but Zoom is a good option for that too. It sounds crazy because I know we're using it for everything, but it worked really well and it got the message across, and it was interesting. So
thank you. So I've
got at the chamber, we're doing a coffee chat next Tuesday with the business community. So if any, so we can definitely share some of those stories.
That's great.
With you.
Coffee talk.
Coffee talk. Coffee chat.
Outstanding. Do we have public, John? I want to go to public comments, but I don't know if there is any.
We do not, Mr. Chair.
That's good. I want to make note of something as well. I didn't put it on the agenda because I thought of it last week, but I forgot to put it on the agenda. In our statement, I'm sorry, I'm looking forward here as I'm talking to you. Forgive me. One moment. Description and purpose. That we went through after we did our mission statement, we defined our Economic Development Committee description and summary of purpose document. And I will make note of the fact that the committee structure bullet reads, Chairman, Vice Chairman, and Secretary, all elected by committee members annually at the first meeting in June. So that would be our next meeting, whenever that is.
It's been a year already. Wow.
I know, that was fast.
Time
So
flies.
I think I view it, we would handle it the way that it's generally handled by the Board of Selectmen. We would take up nominations and do it at that meeting. But I would just plant the seed that start thinking now about who you'd like to have as the chair of this committee going into the next year, as well as the vice chair and the secretary, Lil. So although you're doing a bang up job. No, so let's just bear that in mind, give that some thought. And at our next meeting, that will be an agenda item, probably right up at the front of it. And then what I would, I don't know how you guys feel. Let's talk about it real quickly before we go. What the Board of Selectmen does is they typically open the meeting, go through the introductory kind of stuff, and then they vote on who will be the chair for the next year. And at that moment, they shuffle the deck. So if it's a change of chairman, the new person comes into the chairman's role and runs the meeting from that point forward. I would propose that we make the vote and the sitting chairman finishes the meeting, and then the newly elected chairman takes that role at the next subsequent meeting. I don't know if I'm violating any kind of legal structure here, but to me that feels a little bit
I agree
more
with that.
seamless. That's a proposal I'd like to make. I don't know if anyone opposes that.
Nope. Sounds good.
All right. So we'll bring that up. That'll be on the agenda for our next meeting. It's probably going to be next week if I can find a time for us to get together, which would be great for us to do so before the Board of Selectmen meeting. I have a lot I think we all do. So maybe as you guys think about the content and discussion topics tonight, if you have any views or thoughts, pen them down and you can send them to me. I guess we won't have a dialogue back and forth, but if you just share some takes on what you took from this meeting, I think that would be beneficial. And then I'll look forward to Lil. The time is tight, so if you can.
That's okay. I'll get them done.
Yeah, if you can do that
over tomorrow.
I think that'll help me anyway.
Yep, sure.
What we talked about, and we'll just try to create some action items here in the next several days.
Absolutely.
All right. Anybody? Anything else? Awesome. Representative Robertson, are you still with us there?
I am indeed.
Thank you, David, for being here and staying with us for the 2 hours. I really appreciate everything you're doing for our communities and for the businesses in the community, and certainly for all the constituents. And of course, Senator Tarr, that same message goes for you always. Your time is very, very valuable to all of your districts. And so your time spent with us this evening can't be stressed enough how much we do appreciate it. So we will continue to appreciate your ongoing support of our efforts here in the Economic Development Committee, but also in Wilmington. So thank you very much. Stay tuned for more from us. And if you have anything for us, bring it.
Absolutely. And Mike, if I could talk for Senator Tarr and I again, I think your committee is now at the forefront. You're preserving small businesses. You're working in the town. But Mike, I know you've been bringing the concerns of the committee back since I inaugurated, I think, January 1st and January 2nd. You're already pestering me about how we can approach the Small Business Administration and promote Wilmington. So no, thank you all for giving us what we need to hear as we go to speak to the governor's reopening committee and to our colleagues about not just what our districts needs, but what all small businesses need. So thank you to each and every one of you. And also to Jeff and Chair Bendel here, and who are representing the local municipalities tonight.
Thank you very much. Unless there's anything else by any of the members, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Accepted. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of adjournment? Just say yes.
Aye.
Yeah, I see hands. That's good enough. It's unanimous. Again, thank you all for being here, and we'll be in touch again very, very soon.
Great.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Stay healthy.
You too.